So for more on this, the impact on the election on the U.S.-Mexico relations, and other election-related news, it is an honor and a very, very big pleasure to welcome former U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Roberta Jacobson, to the show. Ambassador, how are you? I'm so glad you came with us. I know it's really late over there. We changed our clocks, and I know you're a notoriously early sleep, right?
Well, I'm not so old that I can't stay up this late, but I do get up early most days. So you're keeping me up past my bedtime, Dan, but it's for a good cause. I'm thrilled to be here.
Ambassador, for coming on. Let's get started. I have a lot of questions for you, a lot of things that I just talked about in this last segment that I want to ask you about more. But I want to start really focusing on Mexico because I know you had a lot to do with developing the U.S.-Mexico relationship in the last administration. And there are a lot of people in Mexico who think that a Trump administration would be better for Mexico because all Trump will ask him is put people at the border, keep out immigration, and I don't really care what else you do. And AMLO would like that because he doesn't have to be restricted by, say, a Biden administration who would be getting into human rights and the drug trade and labor laws, all these things that maybe AMLO would not like. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a couple things. First of all, I think in the end, that's not necessarily good for Mexico. And I'm not sure that's even good for López Obrador. To have a continued Trump presidency. Remember the insults to Mexicans, but also the immigration policies are not sustainable. Eventually, this is a problem for Mexico, too, to keep all these people in Mexico, especially during a severe recession like a depression that Mexico's having right now. I also think it's a little bit of a betrayal of our own values. We're not working together. And Donald Trump could impose tariffs at any moment. We've seen that for any reason on Mexico and take it all back. So I think the arbitrary and capricious nature of Trump is also something that, you don't want to poke that bear. And I don't think that's good for Mexico.
Gomez on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he thought that that AMLO was secretly trying to assure that Trump was elected because, on the surface, everybody thinks that the relationship is a pretty good one, no?
I think, look, they've had a surprisingly good relationship. That's absolutely right. And you're certainly right, and viewers are right if they think that there are uncomfortable issues that don't get brought up by Donald Trump, right? Democracy, rule of law, and security issues, frankly. But you can't resolve those alone in Mexico. You can't resolve the security problems alone, and we're not talking about them. I also think you got to acknowledge that on climate issues and on energy, they're going to be in a different place, Joe Biden and López Obrador. There's no doubt. But I think that is something we need to talk about and we need to work together on. We need to deepen this relationship. It's going okay because it's superficial. It's like that teenager who never realizes their potential. That's what our relationship is right now. It's arrested development.
Right. And it seems like things are being affected on the border. And as I said before, it's extraordinary to me to think about all of Trump's rhetoric. And now Latinos are leaning more towards Trump than they did 4 years ago. There was a late poll that said that Hillary won 60 to 61% of the Latino vote, and now Biden's polling at 51%. So I mentioned a couple of the reasons, but what is your opinion on this? This is a really strange phenomenon because it seems that more minority voters are choosing Biden than they did Hillary in 2016.
I think overall that's not true of minorities writ large. It may be true of some Latino voters. Certainly conservative values on things like LGBTQ issues or other things may drive them more towards Republicans. I think the question is how important is immigration and immigration issues? When migration was largely Mexican, I think there was a lot more attention to migration, and that could happen again as Mexican numbers go up. When migration is non-Mexican, with Mexican Americans and Mexicans in the United States being the largest of the Latino minority, I think that may make a difference. I also think you have to look at Cuban Americans, Venezuelan Americans as part of that Latino quotient who have always been Republican. So I think those numbers will shift a little bit. I think those numbers are actually better than what you're seeing in some of the polls for Biden. But I think there's going to be a push right through the tape, as they say, to get the Latino vote out and make sure it votes Democratic, especially in places like Arizona and Texas.
There's been some criticism on the Biden campaign that he hasn't doing enough, and I guess you can always say that a candidate doesn't do enough. Do you think that they've been doing enough Latin outreach in these communities? And also, we know that there's been an incredible amount of misinformation campaigns targeted at voters in Florida and Texas and other battleground states. What do you think is going to happen?
I think there has been an enormous amount of misinformation, disinformation, as well as voter suppression in these places. And I think it's been targeted at Latino and communities of color. I do think the Biden campaign has done a fair amount. You can always do more. Joe Biden had a plan directed at Puerto Rico and debuted it in Florida over a month ago. You know, Donald Trump didn't talk about Puerto Rico till the last couple of days. You've had Kamala Harris making visits to Florida, to the Latino community, and you've had the candidate going to places where there are large Latino populations. So I think that Joe Biden is addressing that issue, but I think that you can always do more. And I think it'll be important to continue to push that message out right up until the end, even if 75 million Americans have voted.
Trump didn't throw paper towels at voters in Florida today. Let's talk about Kamala Harris tomorrow, who will be flying to McAllen, Texas, to doing an event. And that's an extraordinary development, as I mentioned in the segment, because I don't remember the last time a Democratic candidate was actively campaigning in Texas only days before. Number one, what is that about? Number two, why isn't Biden deciding to go to Texas in those last days? Because I know Beto O'Rourke and some of the Texas representatives are urging him to do so, and he has not announced any plans to go to Texas yet. Do you think Texas is in possibility that Texas can go blue?
Well, look, Texas has been in play for a while now. Remember that analysts have been telling us that Texas is going blue or at least purple, you know, in the last two elections, and it hasn't. And it may not in this election either. It may stay red, as your map showed. But the fact is, it is changing. And it's changing inexorably and will stay changed because of the demographics towards voters who skew Democratic. So I think that's one of the reasons why Kamala Harris is going. She knows that it's a critical issue, border trade, border security. But, you know, where you deploy your resources at the very end of an election race is always a debate that's difficult. And so the fact that Kamala Harris is going means Texas is in play. The fact that Joe Biden's not going does not mean Texas is not in play. He's just got to figure out where to spend his time in the 5 days. I think Texas has gotten a fair amount of attention in what my friend Beto O'Rourke calls the most important election perhaps since 1864.
Okay. And if Biden wins and he starts brand new, what would be, if you were part of the administration, what would be the first thing that Biden should tackle with Mexico?
Well, I think actually Joe Biden has said one of the things that he'll do, which I think is absolutely correct. He'll seek an early meeting with AMLO to get together with him and talk about a joint strategy on the economy and on security, two areas that they've got to focus on. And he will stop using the offensive and nasty rhetoric immediately. So those would be early wins in my view.
Right. Ambassador Roberta Jacobson, thank you so much. And I just want to say, as a resident of Mexico City and part of the American community, you are incredibly highly respected here. Everybody in the American community talked very highly about you as ambassador, and we hope to see you back here sometime soon with us.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. I look forward to it. I really do.
Thank you. Ambassador Roberta Jacobson, thank you so much.